Hello, welcome to the Animal Resistance University. This is a workshop by Connie Spence about lobbying and animal rights. I hope you enjoy this workshop.
Guys, to want to do more or educate people on this because we are so passionate, and the idea of veganism should have worked based on that economical structure we were told our whole lives. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to make this boring. Like, politics is heavy and boring in a lot of ways. And Cubes of Truth and activism is really anarchist and fun, right? I'll tell you a little bit about the type of activism I used to do so that you can understand. Like, I was an anarchist activist, and it was a wild ride. And politics is so far out of my spectrum. I've been the type of person who literally hated the fact that I was presented, just like you see in the United States, with one evil guy, Trump, and another one, Biden. I'm tired of that system. And we keep letting it happen. We keep letting us get presented with a choice, and we think, okay, I have to choose these two people. But the reality is, it starts long before that. Those are corporate injections. Corporations lobbied to elevate these people to inject them to your choice. And so I'm going to kind of talk about that. Anyways, okay, so there's a few more people. Michael is one.
Hello? Hello?
Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You've been for nearly 6 years.
How many years?
Nearly 6. Nearly 6 years a vegan. Been an activist just over a year. I don't know anything about lobbying.
Okay, fair enough. I think Peter is next.
Hey, I'm Peter. I've been vegan for 4 years. I'm not really sure why that question's being asked, but yeah. I'm an activist and I don't have any experience with lobbying.
Okay. I was asking the question about how long you're vegan and the activism part, because it's really interesting to see somebody become vegan and become an activist within the last year or two in a very fast time frame. It shows like somebody's drive to go to the next level. For me, I actually been vegan for 10 or 11 years. I didn't start activism until many years after. So my slow cadence to getting to where I'm at is kind of an important context, because when we veganize people and we try to educate them to get to that next level, we have to shrink that, right? We don't want to veganize somebody and see these systems fail, and then 10 years later, they decide, oh, you know, I should change the system, right? So that's why I was bringing that up, is how long you've been vegan, when you became an activist, and all that kind of provides a context to how we need to shape our activism and education in the future because of these systems. But anyways, I'm really happy. Are there any other people? I think that's it. Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Hold down. Okay, keep going. Yep, I'm gonna turn my video off for 1 second. I'm gonna grab a drink, but I'm listening and watching. Go ahead. Let's see, Lucy or...
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lucy. I've been vegan for about just under a year now. And basically, I'm a filmmaker, so I'm here because I want to learn how to use my skill to help with activism. Activism just now, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a form of activism. That's great. Depeche?
Hi, my name is Dipesh. I've been vegan for 5 years now, and I've been active since I've been a vegan, and I have no knowledge on lobbying. I pass it to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I've been vegan for 8 years, active for around 7. I've been involved in political activism, but I don't know a lot about lobbying.
Gotcha. Nice to meet you.
Sure.
Patricia?
Hey, so my name is Patricia. I think I've been vegan for 2 or 3 years. I don't really know. I don't have a date. I've been activist for around 1 year, and I have no experience with lobbying.
Hey them.
Hi, I'm Haytham, and I've been vegan for about 3 years and an activist for the whole 3 years. It was easy for me because I was an activist for other causes before I became vegan, so it just felt natural to, speak up for the animals. And what else did I need to answer? Experience with lobbying. Yeah, I've had experience with lobbying, and I've seen you, Connie, at one other talk. I forgot where it was, but like a month ago, maybe on Vegan Justice Week.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Didier Daniel.
Yes, hello. I'm Daniel from Luxembourg, and I'm vegan since until 5 years ago. And coming from a small country, very lobby surroundings. I don't know even now what is really now to speak of, but if it's the way of lobbyism around us, it's very hard in Luxembourg. And yeah, for activism, I came soon activist because as soon as I know what is the veganism, I switched on it. I show so many documents and so far, and I wanted to do something more because even the country wasn't slept. So I take contacts for everybody, and soon I had contact with Siobhan, who was from Activism on the Roads. So she helped me very well to organize something, and she was involved in different movements. So the first one they had already for the cubes, they had the Noga in Luxembourg. I didn't know about it. So as a father of small kids, etc., it was difficult to choose between the direct action and the safe movement. So I chose the safe movement. I tried my best for 1, 2, 3 years now. But for last year, we don't had so many didn't, because it's very difficult to find very good stuff, very good people who are organizing, being involved. So it's very difficult. So for the moment, what I can do for the moment is really between job, family, etc. It's very the online activism, pushing it, and giving my helps where I can online, or with my tasks, my narrators. Yeah, and now of course this lobbyism, I didn't know it before, so I expect something.
Yeah, no, I mean, as
Thank you.
soon as we get started, I think, we'll understand kind of what our new energy needs to, in parallel, have. The beauty of it is you don't actually have to choose between activism or lobbying. It should be part of our tool belt. Okay, great. Nice to meet you. And Nina, did you? I think you went.
Yes. So, Nina, I've been vegan for 4 years. I've been an activist for almost a year, and I have no experience with lobbying.
Okay, nice to meet you. I think there's Stijn, Joffrey, and Veronique. Actually, we have a lot of people. So if you, I guess I'm realizing we're already at 10:30. So you guys tell me, do we want to continue to go on introductions? Is it helpful? Or do you want to get started and we can do some at the end? Go ahead and start. Okay,
Yes.
let's go ahead and get started. Okay, all right, great. So I'm really glad you guys joined. The topic of today is lobbying, and I'm going to give more context to lobbying than actual, like, this is what you need to do on the ground. It's going to be different in every country. But in the United States, the horrible part of the United States is that the United States agriculture system was mimicked in most countries. And so what I talk about in the United States, perhaps many times, will be the case in a different country. So my background is I've been vegan for 11 years. I got into activism doing like marches and other things. I was in the advertising data industry, and I just didn't feel like holding a sign that said meat is murder that maybe somebody 25 feet away couldn't read was the most effective way for me personally, because my personality needed to give context to exactly how I felt about the why of going vegan. So I saw this in 2016. I saw this article about, and you can look it up, it's about somebody who basically hijacked a stage light, put on a giant hotel wall, "Fuck Trump," in letters with light. And the article said that police didn't know how to stop him because it was free speech. He was on a public sidewalk, light isn't vandalism. And I was like, oh my God, I need to figure out what that light is. So I figured it out, and I have been doing activism with what I called the vegan Batman light for 2 years. Maybe 3. I probably did it 3 to 4 nights a week, every week. I didn't need 20 people with me. I didn't need any sort of organizing at all. I just needed to grab my equipment, which is not that easy to grab. It's like 150 pounds of equipment, and roll it somewhere and put the light 7 stories in diameter, 7 stories being each story 10 feet or whatever the equivalent is high, a message about veganism on walls where thousands of people in one shot would see it. And people would come find me, and they'd have conversations, and the conversations actually went amazing because it's a passive way to tell somebody something. And understand that when you're doing Cubes of Truth or any other activism, that while they're great, one of the things that happens is if someone has a perception of you, maybe it's an older person has a perception of a younger female that he doesn't take as serious, or whatever it is, your face can make you more relatable or less relatable. Does that make sense? That Batman light had no face on it. And it was very easy to say direct things and have people kind of be like, oh, that light's so cool. Police interactions, you name it. Now, here's what happened a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, I started wondering, okay, you know what? We're literally on the brink of, we have to be saving animals by now, because you go to any grocery store, and the dairy shelf, which used to be all dairy products and maybe a few plant-based milk, is now 20% shelf space is plant-based milk. So the population didn't increase 20%, right? So you're going to have to believe that 20% market share is indicative of the demand of plant-based companies. So then we should be seeing a decrease in dairy cows by something, maybe not the 20%, by something. I start tracking, and sure enough, we aren't seeing a decrease. And in fact, they're increasing it. And every year they're asking our government for a bailout. And every year they're getting it. And every year they're dumping milk. Every single year. Maybe I can share a screen really fast of, let me see. 1 second. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just finding the screen that I'm looking for so you can see. Okay, share, and then let me know if you can see this. Okay. Here is an article just from April 7th, and it says they're dumping tens of thousands of gallons per farm down the drain. And this is right now.
InSpec, powered by Zern, allows you to create unlimited configurations, copy a similar project, share projects with colleagues.
But anyways, this is right now, but this has actually happened year after year since 2016 that I can find it.
We have never dumped milk before.
Look at all of
this
that
is
weight.
not something you normally do.
It is insane. And so it says supply is outpacing demand. Okay, so what have we been taught, right? What have we been taught our whole lives? That supply and demand is how our economy in many regards works. Even if you're not in the most capitalist, society, the reality is you believe that when you stop buying milk, when your demand goes down, and there's too much supply, that the next year they reduce the supply. That's what we believe. And that's what we've been promised with our veganism. In fact, that's how the system should work. Veganism should liberate those animals. That business should risk failure and therefore reduce their production the next year. But that's not happening in the dairy industry at all, and in the meat industry in the United States. It's blasphemous to have empathy and sympathy towards these mega farmers and claim we have to save them because they feed us. When they're dumping it down the drain, they are withholding food from us. That's what's happening. Our taxes in the United States bail them out year after year, and now the cadence keeps increasing. And I think in this article, it says, let me see, maybe not in this one. One of them says the DFA, which is the basically Dairy Association Cooperative in the United States, told them to dump it and said, it's okay, you'll get reimbursed next week. I don't know if that pisses you off, but it pisses me off. And so this isn't the first time. This is, like I said, this is just days ago. This has been going on for years here. So why is this happening? It's happening because in the United States specifically, and in a lot of parts of the world, you may not know this, but really the first industry of most countries was agriculture. Before industrial revolutions, before war, before oil, before transportation, before all of it, it was agriculture. And so your entire political structure likely was created by farmers. Does this make sense to everybody? I don't know if this is like, so when your political system is created by farmers, they create laws to protect them. Back when the United States was started, 99% of everybody who came here was a farmer. And that's a legit stat. Literally everybody who came here needed to be able to fend for themselves. And that meant they had to feed themselves or whoever they brought, right? And so then you have the first 4 or 5 presidents in the United States were farmers. Then in the United States, we have slavery. And what are those slaves doing? They're tending farms, right? So you're exploiting animals, you're exploiting people. In the United States, colonization basically had European populations disseminate indigenous people, not just because they wanted to take their land to live on. It's because they needed a lot of land to farm on. It was all driven by farming and livestock farming and this idea that we have to cultivate the land. But as livestock farming started increasing, we all know how much resources and land it uses. So really livestock farming obliterating land and populations growing drove more colonization to need more land to abuse and to take this land from others. So at the turn of the century in the United States, 1900s, slavery had just been, dismantled, but there was still systemic slavery in the late 1800s. Believe it or not, in our history, in the US history, there is so much systemic racism that still exists today that stems back to when slavery was abolished, and that systemic racism was set into motion by farmers and agriculture people who had political power. And here's what I mean. So people, I don't know if there's questions, so I just, okay. Demand for meat is increasing. Okay, so we can talk about that. Demand for meat is increasing as populations get richer. That's actually not because of what you think. The United States uses our taxes to act as a business development arm and market using marketing dollars in countries that are middle class. So we send people over there to create that desire to eat meat. So we're the ones who are doing this. It's not that people are like, oh, I want to eat more McDonald's, or oh, I want to eat more meat, right? It ends up being that we start implanting offices from our agriculture and setting up trade deals and giving them like low priced meat, so that you start building that that middle class. Every country that increases their meat intake has everything to do with a trade deal from another country, likely the United States. India is a great example. Trump was in India like, I don't know, was it a month and a half ago? Everyone thought his purpose for being there was to discuss peace and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't. He was trying to create a meat trade deal for the United States. So China is the same way. Our trade deals, and which are a mixture, it's us sending them meat, it's also buying their meat, but most importantly, we use 70% of our soy that we grow here goes to to feed their livestock. So they're basically using all our resources instead of theirs, all of our land, to feed their livestock. And so again, what that does is it doesn't push down, it doesn't necessarily push down their land resources, and it allows all of the people that they have to support, to live there. And so at the end of the day, if you want to track why meat consumption is going up, it's going up because of these countries pushing marketing dollars and trade deals on each of those countries that middle class is increasing. So for the most part, the biggest contributors to that is Brazil, China, and the US. And so Trump was also negotiating with the UK now that they don't necessarily have to follow the EU rules of not trading with the United States. And so we're driving a ton of that demand. I was just doing research on our marketing team here. This isn't all of agriculture, but the dairy has multiple marketing like companies that are nonprofits, and they force dairies and co-ops to give a certain percentage of their profit to them. They pull in almost $1 billion a year. And what they do is they go to McDonald's and Taco Bell's and Domino's of the world, and they help them market to those countries their products. And they make their products cheesier all the time. So there's always like an extra cheesier version of a taco, an extra cheesier version of a pizza, a quadruple the meat on a pizza. That comes in from the marketing dollars from the US spread across the world. So they are specifically mapping out where people's socioeconomic income is increasing, and those marketing dollars are what's creating that desire more than just people having that desire. If you have to think about it like this, if vegans had that marketing dollar and we went to middle class, wouldn't that be a better model? Middle class can afford more expensive vegan meats, right? It's really just marketing. So the marketing is a dangling of a carrot that happens from major players like the US, Brazil, and China, where our tax dollars go to pay for the dairy industry or the meat industry's overhead costs. Those overhead costs include equipment. Those overhead costs include water, feed. It includes marketing. Our taxes are used to then market to these other countries. And so that's what I'm getting into. So the history, okay, the middle class means something different in American and British English. Okay, so yeah, perhaps here, you know, we can talk about that in a second. So let me go back to the United States in the 1900s. In the 1900s, this was right around the Second Industrial Revolution. People were starting to change jobs. They were becoming more technical, if you will. And the population of farmers went down to 70%. And so it was continually going down, but they stayed in political power. In the United States, we had several events that were bad, you know, from the 1920s to 1930s, but most specifically, farmers in our country obliterated our land, and we had the Dust Bowl. Nobody really talks about that as being like a farmer's, like it being their fault, but they basically set the stage for what feels like a lot of financial suffering across the United States. And so what happened was in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, who's known for creating the New Deal, basically saw that farmers were also struggling to make a living and had overproduced all this food while at the same time the population wasn't able to afford the food, and so they were starving as well. And so during the Great Depression, obviously these things shaped out, but what FDR did is he used the government's money, which were people's taxes, to buy the oversupply of those farmers and distribute it to the needy. That was called the Agriculture Act of 1933. We are now, you know, in 2020, and it's now called the Farm Bill. It literally, those farmers never let go of it. They never let go of how beneficial it was for them to create more than demand and have government buy it all back and distribute it to people. The problem is that now they are so blasphemously overproducing, and there's so many fail-proof ways in our Farm Bill that pay them back, that year after year, they always say, I'm telling you, if you look at articles, 2016, oh my gosh, we didn't expect it. It was a perfect storm. You know, there was a trade agreement with Canada and it didn't go through as planned and we didn't sell. We need the country to bail us out. 2017, oh my gosh, you know, there was a drought and there was, you know, there was this issue and we need another bailout. 2018, 2019, oh my gosh, the Chinese tariffs are just pushing us out of their market and we need a bailout. 2020, COVID-19 and the Chinese tariffs, we need a bailout. The problem is they're now not giving the food to the needy. They're now putting it in stockpiles. In the United States, we have a stockpile that the last time they measured it was at 4.5 billion pounds. It was about half and half between how many unsold meat products and how many unsold dairy products. Now, after they measured that, in the last year and a half, there are articles that literally say there's no more space. They've maxed out of every refrigerated, stockpiled space in all of the United States, and that they're rapidly trying to build more stockpile. It's very strange to me why, if you have this giant stockpile, why you would overproduce the next year when you could just utilize that stockpile. Some people will say, well, you always need to have a reserve meat just in case something happens. Okay, something's happening right now, pandemic's happening, and people are panic buying. They're still not accessing that stockpile. They're still asking for bailouts, and they're still and in some regards, maybe they've just decided, we're not even gonna put it in the stockpile, we're just gonna dump it out. The reason they dump it out is because it manipulates the price. So in the dairy industry specifically, because it's not based on supply and demand, the government essentially, in the beginning of the year, I think my internet might be, do you guys still see me? It said my internet is kind of unstable. Okay.
Yes, we can still see you, yeah.
Okay. So in the United States, at least, the way the dairy industry works is at the beginning of the year, the government and the USDA decide what price they're going to sell the dairy at. And let's say it's $4. And if they supply too much and the demand isn't there, then that price should drop to, say, $1.50. But they don't want it to drop to $1.50. So they just dump out the milk, and then they get reimbursed for the difference anyway. It's a mess. Other things in our farm bill that already protect them are insurance policies. So 60 to 70% of our taxes pay for their insurance. For the dairy industry, there's what's called margin protection program. And so they can, if they did decide to let their price go down, right? There's actually insurance policy that pays them back for that difference. So again, I don't know if you guys understand the idea of capitalism, but failure is imperative for capitalism to work. Okay, so supply and demand requires the people that make the supply to abide by the demand. And the only way they'll abide by the demand is if they're losing money and they're failing. When they can't fail, when there's insurance policies to pay them back, when there's, so they get those insurance policies and they can write claims. If there's a weather issue like a drought or a flood, they can write claims on those dead animals. You've seen videos of the United States during hurricanes where these farmers will leave their chickens and lock them in. Do you know why that is? Nobody who had a business that risked failure would ever just leave their product to waste. The reason they do that is they have 2 or 3 insurance policies per chicken. And so instead of making $6 on one chicken that dies, or that $6 on one chicken that you sell, if there's a flood and you have 3 insurance policies, you make $18. It's a profit. It's all for profit. So the Farm Bill includes all those insurance policies. The United States created laws that prevent transparency to understand the claims when they make claims for those animals. And it's because they double and triple dip. Another interesting thing is that the insurance company in the United States called the Farm Bureau, that the USDA, which is the organization that's supposed to be like the agriculture oversight group, the Farm Bureau is also their lobbying arm. So our taxes, 60 to 70% of our taxes pay for their insurance, for the farmers' insurance premiums to be sent to the Farm Bureau. And then the Farm Bureau also is a lobbying group. And the Farm Bureau has offsite, their banks are in other countries that you typically see on movies when they're like, oh yeah, we have We have banks in Sweden and, you know, in like, I don't know, the islands, right? Where they really want that transparency to not be there. It is that corrupt. The Farm Bureau is the most powerful lobby of the agriculture industry in the United States. And so, is it possible to not have the tab open? Just, oh yeah, I can unshare. Yeah. Is that better? I stopped sharing.
Yes, and you can also switch from speaker view to what is it called, gallery view, and then you can also, can people also switch, or having everybody on it, or just you or the person who's speaking?
You want me to switch, or other people can switch?
No, people can choose. Yeah.
Yep, got it. Okay, so again, in the United States, from the beginning of our country, farmers had control. Now, how have farmers maintained control? This is really important because this may not exist in your country, which helps you. In the United States, have you ever wondered why we don't have popular vote and we have electoral vote, which is the Electoral College? The Electoral College basically means that districts are set up across the United States in states to give more political power, voting power, to rural, smaller populated places than more diverse populated places. So you could have a district, and they call it gerrymandering, where they gerrymander the district to give more political power, meaning they get more electoral votes for less people than the more diverse and larger populations. This is problematic for systemic racism, again, because in the United States, you know, the farmer's persona from hundreds of years ago is still the persona of today. It is very much a white male dominated political power. And it matches exactly with white males in the farming industry. There's been so much racism with pushing out people of color farmers in the United States. So it's a problem for systemic racism, but guess what? It's also a problem. Farmers are less than 1.5% of the population here. That means that vegans are at least at 3%. I actually believe vegans are at 6 to 8% in the United States now. There are more vegans than there are farmers. So if we had a popular vote, essentially we would have a lot of power, but we don't. The Electoral College keeps farmers in power of our government. That's why the government constantly hands them billions and billions of dollars of bailouts over and over again. That's why presidents do it, because they won't get elected unless they pander to the farmer vote. So gerrymandering districts and electoral colleges keep a population of 1.5% in power. Now, let's take a step back. Let's say we didn't know any of this and we're just talking with our non-vegan friends about the elite. Who are the elite of your country? Take out royalty. Like, who are the elite? I can guarantee if you map out who the elite are of your country, it's very likely they're a farmer investor of some sort. No kidding, that literally, that 1.5% of the farmer population, the majority of them are also our elite here. So the corruption that exists in the political framework is intense, but even more so, it's really just that you can find many instances of oversupply in the United States. Last year, there was an article about the pig surplus. I think, let me grab the screenshot. Second. All right, I'll share my screen for you guys.
I think Stan wanted to ask or say something.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Just a question, the 1.5% who has a lot of influence, you say, are these like pig barons, like they call them? So do they have a lot of property? Do they own, does one person own a lot of stables?
Yeah,
like that?
Warren Buffett's a good example. He is a farmer investor, land investor in our country. There's in our billionaire list, like the top 50, there's a good 40% that are farmer investors. I don't know what they're not called pig barons here, but they don't live on the farm. Don't mistake in that. They're farmer investors. They live in Manhattan. They live on the beach around, here. South Dakota is a place where I heard a lot of them live because they have some sort of interesting tax break there that literally makes them untaxed, and it keeps their wealth much higher. But yeah, absolutely. I don't want you to think that 1.5% elite represents like the small local farmer. These are very powerful people that have rigged insurance schemes, have that receive bailouts, that that are more like an investor. Actual farmers in the United States are shrinking because our system's turning into a factory farming system, which is invested by that elite person. So small farmers don't actually get many of these subsidies on purpose. The mega farmers are pushing them out, and a lot of it is because to keep the price low, our industry hires undocumented workers left and right. So 79% of all of our workers here are undocumented. They make 30% less at least. In the United States, you may not know this, and most people in the United States don't know this either, but child labor laws only protect citizens. And so what they'll do is they'll go recruit people from Mexico and Central America, the ag industry. They'll promise them they'll get citizenship. And in the meantime, they'll give them what's called an H-2A visa. It gives them like a migrant worker status. They have them come to the farm and they make them feel like they can bring their family. And so if they bring their children, they can permit their children to work on that farm too.
Shit.
And the children can be 12 years old. It's a mess, and it's a dark underground system that people don't even realize exists. The biggest problem is that, well, not the biggest, but because they're undocumented in a lot of ways and don't get medical, they also don't get paid the way we do. And so it's easy to dangle over their head that, they must work for you for this long till they get paid. The other thing is that supposedly amount of accidents on the job, like where they're getting their arms cut off, their hands cut off, happens like every single day. And it never gets reported because, again, they make these people initially feel like they're legal, and then the system makes them feel like they're just going to get deported. So I don't know if that exists in your countries, but the huge reason there's not a lot of whistleblowing here is because of how they hire undocumented workers. And a huge reason why there are investors that live far away is it disconnects them from all of that. And so you might have a farmhand that speaks English and operates the majority of that farm co-op, but everybody who walks on that farm with animals and does anything with them is likely to be an undocumented worker. 79% is a stat that the Department of Labor gave. You know that they're conservative because they're You know what I mean? Like, they're never going to give the max. They're never going to be like, you know what, it's at least 79%, but more than likely 85 or 90%. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, the people in power are not farmers on a tractor. They very much are investors.
Okay, thank you. That's very clear.
Yep. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions? This might be a good time to pause. So this is the background of the corruption, right? This is how we've gotten to this point. In the United States, the Farm Bill is our legislation that essentially says, okay, this is how much of Americans' taxes are going to supplement via subsidies, which is just welfare. It's another word for welfare. We should start, I don't know what the language is in other countries, but people in the United States look down at people that need welfare to get, like, buy groceries or whatever. What farmers are getting in the form of subsidies, where we pay for all their stuff and we bail them out, is absolutely welfare. It's welfare for the elite. And so with that said, the Farm Bill in the United States is the major bill that's negotiated every 4 to 5 years. We just had one pass. It was a 2018 Farm Bill that didn't get passed until 2019. And it has to be changed, because every year they give more and more of our taxes. They make, this is why their product costs less than a vegan meat item. A vegan meat company isn't able to get subsidized soy ingredients that are at a reduced cost to make their vegan meat and thereby sell their vegan meat for less. So the subsidies make them more competitive. That's why an entire cow, a burger, is on $1 menu. And so we just continue paying for more and more of their overhead costs. So that's what subsidies are. Add to the insurance policies, which means it makes them not be able to fail, and then add to it bailouts, which further make them incapable of failing. And so that's why we have to lobby, because unfortunately, at least here, no amount of vegan consumerism that we've done, no amount of almond milk that we drank, oat milk that we drank, no amount of activism that drove more vegans is saving animals. And it's a sad reality. Now, I wouldn't talk about this to non-vegans in that same way. You always want people to feel as though that the system should have worked as it does. And so as we're veganizing people and doing activism, we're increasing the social aspect of the social justice part, right? But by avoiding the politics and laws part and what's happening, unfortunately, you can look at your production numbers. I look at ours and they've not gone down. They've never gone down. In fact, the 24, there's an article about 24 states, all of those bailouts they got the year before, they increased their production between 2 and 10%. So they're constantly saying, well, they're dumping milk and 10% demand is gone and they needed a bailout, but then they're increasing the next year 10% more. Even if they kept it the same, they would still would be a gap of 10%. So they're increasing it all the time. The system in the United States incentivizes them to oversupply. And so lobbying, what lobbying is in the United States and in many other countries, is that it means that you are able to create a group that creates relationships with politicians. Now, you can create relationships with them just by meeting with them, or in the United States, you can actually donate to them. You can pay them to be reelected by, if you send a certain amount of money, they have more advertising dollars to then advertise for their reelection, right? So if you go in the United States and you look across the board, we have different websites that show you who lobbies for what political candidate and what category it's in. Is it the oil industry, the real estate industry, the agriculture industry? And over 75% of our politicians are sent a ton of money from the agriculture industry. And so in the United States, our laws are very much aligned with what those high-paying lobbyists want, not what the public wants. That's why when you see something from there, when it comes to gun laws here, you could have literally the population saying, please no more, better gun laws. Nobody here is saying, they make it sound this way, but nobody in the United States is saying, let's restrict all gun use. Because it just wouldn't happen. What people want are stricter gun laws so that somebody doesn't just go on the internet who's had psychological issues tracked, right? So somewhere there's psychological issues tracked. They go on the internet, they buy a semi-automatic, and they buy 800 rounds of ammo, and nobody flags it at all. And so what the United States people are really open to, believe it or not, are, at least before COVID-19, was creating stricter background checks and things like that. But the NRA, which is the gun lobby, literally owns politicians. And what I mean by that is certain politicians wouldn't even have made it to where they made it without the NRA's money. And so a great example of that is what happened in Florida, where there were several school shootings and the public was ready to change it. And Rubio would not even say anything bad about it because the NRA completely owns him. So that's an example of our system. Lobbying is creating relationships. It doesn't have to just be at your federal level. It could be at your local level. It could be with your sheriff and police department, right? Maybe you have a police department that is constantly, like in the United States, harassing Black communities and leaving white communities alone, even though there's drug use the same in both communities, right? Protesting isn't going to change them doing that. Lobbying will, because the head of police are elected in just like politicians are. And so lobbying is how corruption exists in all these systems, because corrupt people with money are the ones by and large lobbying. And we have to change that narrative, whether it's for veganism or for socioeconomic stuff, for food inequity, for police brutality. There's so many things that we need to be lobbying. And so I founded a vegan lobbying group called Vegan Justice League, so Vegan Justice League is the name that vegans see. agriculturefairnessalliance.org is the name that our legislation is seen in DC. Our first legislation is a pilot program to prove that instead of using our taxes to bail them out and dump milk out and all of that, that we should use our taxes, because it's more economically sound, by the way. Like, a fiscal conservative should not want to see our taxes being used as welfare to then just be like wasted. No meat eater wants to see meat and dairy wasted either. Like, at least give them that. They want to eat their meat, right? Their meat. When it comes to our first legislation, we are aiming to get tax dollars to transition an at-risk farmer who's at risk of failing, transition them to a plant-based or a plant-based adjacent sustainable farming. Before COVID-19, we had a lot of great feedback. It was very bipartisan. I can talk about if you decide to go down a path like this, that you have to make it speak to all sides of the political spectrum. You can't introduce animal legislation. It just will not work in most countries. Like, it's too left, it's too liberal, it's too animal focused, and animals can't vote. You have to create a people element. So anyways, I'm going to stop there, and we can ask some questions. I don't know. I see a lot of comments. I feel like I would never be able to catch up. So maybe someone can speak to a question.
Can I ask a question? I wrote it in the chat.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, I was asking if the demand keeps shifting to more vegan products. At the end, maybe these big investors, they will change to these other companies. And I'm thinking, for example, on Beyond Meat.
So, okay. I wish that were the case, but it's been going on for 5 years. Beyond Meat was a unicorn stock. They were one of the biggest stock surges in the United States or world that we have ever seen since 25 years. The last one was like the Palm Pilot. So it shows you how powerful we are. The problem is that if you're an investor and let's say a meat company buys out Beyond Meat. This would be devastating, by the way. We do not want a meat company to buy it out because they've monopolized power in the food system. So if a meat company were to buy Beyond Meat, they're making consumer dollars like crazy, and they're still overproducing and taking all our tax dollars. Now, I know people want to believe that there will be a tipping point at some point. But a tipping point, none of us have a crystal ball. We can't predict that. It could happen in 5 years. It could happen in 10. It could happen and the whole agriculture system implodes because there's pandemics, fires, and global warming. But if you think about it, that's where we're at now, and we still haven't reached the tipping point. In fact, last year, our government gave the agriculture industry $28 billion in bailouts. This year, Trump knew that China wasn't going to buy up our products. He had them overproduce, saying that China was going to buy 50 billion of our products. China couldn't even absorb 36 billion of that. He basically, like, he knew it's all a scam. That's what I'm saying. Like, they know this. Economists with MBAs tell them, I'm sorry, but there's not enough demand in China to absorb that much supply. They know that. So so the point is I agree that perhaps the way the system should work is that meat companies should be like, oh, you know what? There's so much money in vegan food. But when they do, why would they stop the other side that is just as profitable to them? Do you know what I mean? They're just going to pile on to more profit. I haven't talked about this subject with anyone, but it is something I think about. Plant-based companies have to hold out. They cannot sell to these dairy companies and these meat companies, because that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get these really stingy people over here still controlling the food system, having that political power and getting both sides of profit. Having plant-based companies stay independent and grow even bigger and create that plant-based narrative lobbying. So they start saying, hey, this is how many people we support. This is how much we contribute to the food system. It is time that you allow subsidized soy to be purchased by us too, so that we can reduce the price. And that, you know, when they reduce the price from $8 to $4, you now have opened yourself up to an entirely new socioeconomic class. vegan protein for vegan protein. We all know that you can be vegan by eating beans and rice and that it's cheap. But nobody's going to do that unless they're emotionally all in. And we can't emotionally all in everybody in every crevice of different socioeconomic conditions. We can't. We have to let the food market itself by being a lower cost. And the only way it's going to be a lower cost is to create fairness in how our taxes support plant-based foods. And the only way that's going to happen is to keep plant-based companies independent. Perhaps meat-based companies would drive that as well, but it wouldn't have anything to do with saving this planet. It wouldn't have anything to do with reducing the animal piece of it. To them, it's all just new revenue streams. Does that make sense? And again, the prediction of when that tipping point is, we can do so much up until that. We really can. Lobbying may not take as long as you think. And I'm going to give you an example of one that took 3 months. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have time for a question? Because Heidi has a question.
Yeah.
Thanks. Heidi?
Yeah, you can ask.
Okay, so I live in the barbecue center of the world, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as everyone probably knows, there's a lot of animal agriculture that happens here. And so the environment is very pro-animal agriculture. How can I get my representative to actually vote against the Farm Bill?
Well, so I think it's the economic side. Much of Texas is conservative politicians. I actually put a billboard up near Dallas that said, it said it's anti-capitalist to bail out these industries. So there's an angle that is conservative here. And that was why I was saying bipartisan pieces of it. I'll give you 3 themes, and what I would suggest, so Vegan Justice League has state chapters. What I would suggest is what part of Texas are you in? Dallas or Austin?
Austin. Yeah, okay. I know Tracy.
You do know Tracy? Awesome. So yeah, I mean, the reality is that certain states obviously are more conservative. With Dallas specifically and with Texas specifically, some of the biggest bigwigs that create this structure live there. There's actually a city, is it Midland? There is a city that's outside of Dallas that literally is all of these farm bureau type executives. I don't know. I imagine the city is literally like mansions, all from our wealth. They're all on welfare, but they live in giant like mansions. It has one of the highest cost of living in the country. But anyways, I did put billboards up there. So the way to bridge this is threefold. So one, farms like Smithfield Farms and these factory farms have investors in other countries. Our tax dollars are actually getting, because there's loopholes, getting sent to Chinese investors and Brazil investors. So what we're doing essentially with our tax dollars is we're making other countries more powerful, and we're giving them the opportunity to own our food system and own our land. And I don't think that's not a conservative ideal. So that's theme one, is China is owning more and more of our land through more and more of their farm investments. 2 is the immigration aspect. People in Texas think a wall is going to prevent immigration. People in Texas start seeing, like, let's be clear, I'm Hispanic, I'm brown, my mom lives in Oklahoma, it's right above Texas, to those of you that don't know. Since Trump has been president, she gets a ton of racism to her. She's 75 and she's this little, dark-skinned woman, and that happens. And what the reason it happens is rural areas that for long periods of time were very white dominated are all of a sudden seeing people that don't speak English and who are dark skinned in their rural towns, and they think that those people snuck through a border. The truth is they're working for the farms, and the farms, like I said before, recruit them. And a lot of times VIP them, VIP meaning very important person, like VIPing them right to the farm, right to that rural town. At the same time that Trump talks about a wall, the same week he was discussing it, he loosened the requirements of that H-2A visa. He increased in this month 50,000 workers, and before, the way that they applied to get there was an in-person interview, right? They made it to where they don't need to apply in person. They can apply in video. And so with COVID-19, like this is also a conservative view. You're meaning to tell me you're gonna bring someone here who you not only didn't interview in person, but you didn't test for COVID-19 from Mexico or Honduras or another Central American country. So people in Texas don't want to see that. So theme one is this industry is creating wealth power from our taxes to people offshore, specifically China and Brazil. Theme two is immigration. And theme three is the welfare aspect. A Republican should be fiscally conservative. They're fiscally conservative when they're worried about medical going to everybody and undocumented immigrants getting medical. They're fiscally conservative when people need grocery assistance. They're so fiscally conservative when someone needs a $125 grocery check that they want those people to prove that they're trying to find work. They want those people to do drug tests, and they want those people, you know, to go through a bunch of hoops to get 125. Why are people not having to jump through these hoops to get a $125,000 welfare check or a 1.1 million welfare check? The rules of subsidies in the United States is that one single head of household can get up to $900,000. His wife can get an additional $900,000 to get $1.8 million in our welfare.
Yeah, I think something's up with the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
So a head of household in the United States can get up to $900,000 for let's just, for purposes of saying this, as a husband and wife, right? Obviously there could be different. Male head of household can get $900,000. His wife can get $900,000 for a total of $1.8 million. His kids, cousins, nieces, or I'm sorry, his kids, nieces and nephews can get $125,000 each. You can literally create a mega empire with a really extended family. And so going back to the third theme in the conservative space is, why are we not over scrutinizing if they're looking for work, if they're doing a good job? Why aren't we drug testing them? Why aren't we checking if they're using that money for cigarettes and beer? Do you know what I mean? It's like people over scrutinize people for $125 saying they're buying cell phones and cigarettes and beer. I can guarantee you those farm families are buying cigars and expensive wine and private jet flights. So those are the three themes that I think that if we bridge the gap, or if we can bridge to the conservative side, also just the wasteful spending, like the stockpile and everything like that, that's so anti-American. Like socialism to conservative people is so anti-American. And so you just have to make sure that you elevate that aspect of it. And the whole reality of our system right now, we live in a corporate socialist society that only looks down on socialism when the public needs, you know, assistance. It's our taxes, and we're basically paying for everyone else. So in Texas, the themes that you want is to bridge it to the conservative side, and it absolutely is the waste. People that eat a ton of meat don't want to see animals go into stockpile either. You know, I'll send you a video. I did a video. It'll help ideate. I might, you know, if we have time, I might show the video. Actually, you guys might like it. It's a like 3-minute video. We can do it later. Any other questions?
I saw a couple of questions, but it seems like they were answered in the meantime. So unless your question isn't answered, you can speak up now.
Okay, so if we should probably expand on the solution.
Yeah, I think Caroline maybe had a question.
Yeah, I had a question like why are these animal farmers, why are they even increasing their, like why not say the same, why increase even your production?
Well, the best way to look at it is this. Let's say you and me started a t-shirt company with vegan messages on it, and it cost us $5 for the shirt and $2 for the print on the shirt, so $7. And we decided to sell the shirts for $10, so we're profiting $3. And we've done a good job of understanding that the vegan movement will buy 10,000 of those shirts. Okay, so 10,000 shirts we're gonna sell. So we produced 10,000. We paid $7 for all of those shirts. So essentially, we've spent $7,000. Imagine that somebody comes along and is like, oh my gosh, I found this new market. You can actually sell 25,000 shirts. And we're like, yes. We produced 25,000 shirts. And unfortunately, we still only sold 10,000. So we're 15,000 short. If we had to suffer those losses because we spent that money to produce them, we would never overproduce the next year. But if someone said, hey, here's 15,000, I know you didn't sell that extra 15,000, but here's the money for it. Are you gonna go back? So now you made the money for 10,000 and you made the full amount of money.
Including the what's the profit? I mean, including these €3 I would get from the government.
Yeah, exactly. So the next year, why would you go back to selling 10,000?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So it's like they're constantly overproducing and constantly getting bailed out for that next additional amount. So they don't want to go back to what demand was. Why would they? It's all fake demand. It's fake demand buffered by our taxes. And again, I know this sounds very USA centric. I want you to understand, we have trade deals with Canada, Mexico, and China specifically. So for sure, their systems are almost exactly the same as ours. The European systems in many countries are also exactly the same. The UK, you can look at bailouts and you can look at dairy issues there. You'll see them there. I was looking at Belgium and I saw some stuff as well where they're included in stimulus packages. Across the world right now, governments are deploying stimulus packages, and you can be sure that your agriculture industry is getting bailed out of their entire year of losses. They basically, when they do that, they wipe clean of all of our veganism. When they bail them out of all of their losses, they're not just including losses for the right now, they're including losses for everything. That's how they negotiate. So, so I can expand on what we need to do about it. lobbying is not an umbrella name. It really is, what it is centralizing people's money in membership form. The same way that in the United States that the NAACP and other civil rights groups pushed through the courts desegregation until it became law and they desegregated schools. That didn't happen because of the Million Man March. The Million Man March gravitated socially people to be on board with this, but it didn't change the law about schools being segregated. Does that make sense? What people did at that time is they were members of a lobbying group because they knew that laws could either make people be empathetic to your cause, or it could prevent you from living out that social structure. So lobbying is essentially, this is what, you know, the Farm Bureau does. This is what the dairy co-ops do. They take small amounts of money from members and it centralizes that money. That money is then used to hire career professional lobbyists. Those lobbyists live and breathe lobbying, and they live near where things are negotiated. So in the United States, that would be DC. Our lobbyist lives in DC, and so when he sets up meetings, it's very simple. He's near and at the White House, and he's creating relationships, but he's also introducing our legislation. Most legislators aren't writing legislation. A lobbying group writes it for them. It's complicated in a lot of ways, writes it for them and presents it to different legislators to get it sponsored. Once that legislator sponsors it, then it needs to get voted in. That's at the federal level, at the national level. At the local level, it can be different. At the local level, you have smaller groups of people that make these decisions, and therefore a single legislator may not need a vote of 500 people. Does that make sense? So a lot of people say voting is where your power is at. You have to understand, once you vote, how long is that person's term? Is it 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? You need to be lobbying the entire in between. That's what everybody's doing to get what they want then and to get what they want in the future election. You have to be really good at negotiating what you want. You have to make sure that you show, we have this many members and this is what, this makes sense because of this would, if you push this many voters, especially if it's bipartisan and it's not just animal focused, you're able to say that everyone can be on board with this. So for example, the at-risk farmer legislation that we pushed, you can find that on our website. veganjusticeleague.com has an FAQ section. It has where legislation is at. It has a subsidies 101 section. My suggestion is, to be honest, my suggestion would be for most of us to create a Vegan Justice League chapter in our country so that you guys manage your money and your lobbyist and your research. But what it does is it keeps us constantly centralized to then not trip each other up, so that when we're doing stuff in the United States, you could be doing stuff over here, and maybe there's an instance where a new trade deal is about to happen and we deploy each other, very rigorously to shape that out. Or you may already have a lobbying group there of some sort. Most countries don't, to be honest. Mexico just had passed their Senate where animal testing is going to be not illegal, but basically that they're going to stop animal testing. And a lot of people have passed that around and have been like, oh my gosh, bravo, look what veganism did. But the truth is it was a lobbying group. It was a very small lobbying group who pushed that through. So the power of lobbying is exponential. Like, again, activism, a lot of times when you need to organize people to march, you might need 1,000 or 10,000 people to march. You could have one lobbyist literally insert themselves and change a law really fast. And here's the example I wanted to give. In Georgia, a state in the United States, most of the public was not necessarily pro-abortion, but they didn't want to make abortion illegal. Most of the public. A conservative Christian group in under 3 months introduced legislation and had it signed to where abortion became illegal in Georgia in under 3 months. They weren't a very hefty paid group either. And so the point is that we need to think about a few things. Veganism is imperative because we're pulling ourselves, we are mentally at least pulling ourselves out of exploitative systems to humans and animals. Activism and education are hugely important. Activism on the street, education, we have to insert education to the youth specifically because the marketing dollars from the other side is infiltrating the school systems. And then lobbying is so important, and most people don't do it, don't know about it, and don't know how to do it. And the point is you don't have to be the lobbyist. You just have to quarterback the lobbyist there. I'm not the lobbyist. I could probably do a decent job at lobbying, but I'm not the lobbyist. I knew that I wasn't a career lobbyist, and so I educated enough people, worked with my co-founder, Laura Reese, and in under a year, we hired our first lobbyist. Literally, I'm being honest. We hired our first lobbyist from my Facebook friends list. Do you know what I mean? Just talking about it over and over again. And so, when you think about our power, there are more of us than there are those farmer investors. The lobbying angle is why they became more powerful, because they're in the ear of every politician all day long. And we need to be on the opposite side, and we need to be telling the politicians the truth. I'm sorry, politician, wait, you're going to give dairy another bailout? Did you just see them dumping milk out and saying like, oh, we're get reimbursed anyway? Are you really going to do that? You know what I mean? We need to be in there. At the very least, to mediate, but for the most part, it would be to change the narrative. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the resources. I was wondering, where do you get the statistics from, especially about meat consumption and subsidies as well? And would you recommend any other resources to educate yourself about lobbying? Yeah.
So first off, do not listen to Veg News or Plant-Based News or any of those organizations when it comes to the numbers. We do a great job in the vegan movement of doing would-be, could-be math. Of this many vegans means each person ate 200 animals, and so when 10 new vegans are created, we saved 2,000 animals. That is not how this works. And that has been a problem in this movement of thinking the barometer of how many animals we're saving is based on how many fast food places has vegan options and how many vegans we know and how many people went vegan during Veganuary. That is not factual. In the United States, the USDA website has production numbers. They release them sometimes every month, but for sure once a quarter. And so where my research started was on the USDA website. I got to mention to you though, it's not an easy undertaking. You are in deep in spreadsheets, right? And PDFs, and you're having to, but they do a good job of showing you year over year and month over year, and you can literally look at the increases. And then when you combine that with the, you know, oversupply numbers that they have and the bailouts, you very much see that it has been rigged. There are articles that'll tell you it's rigged. They're much more hidden from the mainstream media, so don't expect to find them there. They're going to be more like the Hill is a website here, the Hill, Hill. EWG is an environmental website that will show you the amount of subsidy dollars and things like that. It'll give you visibility. So in your country, I would suggest one, finding the source of production truth. So whatever your agriculture industry umbrella is here, it's the USDA, whatever yours is, they should have at the very least articles that discuss it or press releases, but at the most, hopefully they'll have spreadsheets and getting to the real production numbers. They'll blow your mind. They'll just really piss you off. I hope when you listen to this, you get really energized and pissed off to like go to the next level, because so the production numbers there. Subsidies, EWG is a great site for us here, where it shows the dollar amounts. I'm sorry, not on subsidies, on that's on who receives them. It shows the dollar amount of different farms and different people that receive them. Then there's other sites that show contributions, where you can see agriculture and how much their lobbying contributions are to each politician. Subsidy information, my guess is you are going to have a similar bill like ours. So ours is called the Farm Bill. Canada has a supply management bill. Most countries have a large agriculture bill of some sort that is probably one of the most contested between politicians and takes the longest amount of time to draft. So we need to understand a country's GDP is very much based on how well agriculture does. So vegan products, you know, aren't something that the government is intertwined with. And so the success of vegan products don't mean anything to them. But for the reason of subsidies and their investments and everything like that, they look at agriculture like it's their government's product. The government literally acts as the sales guy. Trump and your president or your leader is going around selling your meat and dairy. That is a lot of times what they're negotiating. So what country do you live in?
I live in Switzerland.
Okay. So Switzerland is interesting because they may actually have more fair policy, but I'm not sure. I would have to check.
We have here an initiative, and there will be the whole country will vote on banning factory farming in 2 or 3 years.
That's great. Do you think they'll push to ban factory farming, or do you think that they'll not?
It depends on the campaign and how effective it is.
I mean, but that's a classic example of getting every activist you know on board with lobbying to make sure that happens. You know, that's a great example of where lobbying needs to happen.
I agree.
Yeah.
The person who is in charge of this initiative is now in the national parliament, and they have way more power to speak to politicians. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, but you have to help elevate them. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the thing, is like, yes, somebody is there, but you have to make sure they get reelected and you have to make sure they know they have your support, not just yours, but again, if you centralize money and your lobbyist can create a relationship with them, or maybe they need research done to make sure that what they're pushing for is accurate, right? We have people that volunteer for research, and our lobbyist will sometimes say, hey guys, we need to find rural farmers that can speak to these politicians. And so we go back and we tell our members, hey, anybody who has relationships with local farmers, we need that. And so, if you have a politician that is aligned with you, you have to support them every way that you can, and elevating any other person who is trying to get elected as well. That's what the lobbying group does. It's like, first off, when you first create a lobbying group, you work with the existing politicians to create relationships. Later, you're able to actually elevate and insert your own politicians. We're not there yet. Locally, kind of in New York City, and maybe perhaps in Berkeley, but we're not there yet here. And so that is also an aspect of lobbying, is eventually having the power to elevate who exactly you want in every ideological spectrum to be inserted into political power. I would recommend, even if you live in a local area and perhaps you have the bandwidth to get involved even on a local level, and insert yourself into city councils and stuff, to start doing that. There are micro and macro levels of how lobbying works. Any other questions? So I think it's 11:52 my time. I know some people might have to drop off, so I'm happy to do a round 2 at some point. I actually was affected by, I worked for Disney Media up until last Friday. I was a contractor, and so my free time is going to open up for a bit. Does anyone have any other questions?
Sounds really good to do a second session.
Yeah.
There's someone who has a question, but the mic isn't working. Portugal, many other countries in Europe as well, has a political party for the animals. Do you suggest giving them money, campaigning for them, etc.? I believe we could get a lot of leverage if we partnered with them.
It depends on where they're at. Again, animal-centric stuff is really hard to get voted into the whole mainstream. So I think it's a great thing to align yourself, but you also have to change the current politicians that are there right now. So you almost need a political group, and a lobbying group could be two different things. So a lobbying group can help elevate them, right? The political party. And a lobbying group can then also change the nature of other politicians and create relationships there. So if I were to make a recommendation, it would be to centralize a lobbying group that then helps that animal political party, but also you have your own initiatives where you are changing the narrative of other politicians. Because if you give all your money to that political party and they don't end up getting inserted at all, then you have not changed anybody and anything about politics. Does that make sense? Okay, so
I also see a question.
So Nation Rising, I saw the Nation. So Nations Rising, we are allies. Nations Rising has changed their direction a few times, and I don't know what the current direction is. And what I mean by that is, originally they were just going to be an education advocacy arm of lobbying. So, marching in front of political structures to say, we want these things changed, and educating people on that. Since then, I believe they've activated specific people to go and insert themselves locally and do their own lobbying. I don't know if they've done the whole, we're hiring professional lobbyists that Vegan Justice League and AFA, Agriculture Fairness Alliance, are doing. But we are very much allies. I do want to say in your country that hiring somebody who literally lives and breathes this, because it's a very corrupt political nature, you know, and knows how to negotiate in this, is the holy grail. You should aim to have a professional working every day at this. Does that make sense? And you absolutely have the money to do it, not you, but if you think of all the Veg Fest we went to and 10,000 people showing up, 10,000 people show up, spend about $5 in transportation, probably at least $10 in food, right? If you even had, if you had 10,000 people spending $5 just once, you could hire a lobbyist. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so when you centralize, and when we get all vegans, that's what our goal should be, is to educate all vegans that it is imperative to be a lobbying member. And prove to them with your social justice movements, because in the United States, women got the right to vote. It was because of lobbying. That they actually would meet each other. They were lobbying members. They would meet each other to strategize, and then they would march together. You know what I mean? And then you have the civil rights movement, same thing. It was like they knew that they were creating relationships with politicians. Martin Luther King was creating relationships with politicians in the United States. Malcolm X was creating his own political self-sustaining structure in cities. They knew politics and laws were everything to either preventing them from liberation or allowing them to be liberated. And we need to think the same way. So let's take vegans to that next level. First we went vegan, then we became activists, now we must lobby. We have to change these laws. These laws are preventing animals from being saved. And I just, you know, we can do activism on the street and say, oh my gosh, change these subsidies. But I'm just telling you, politicians aren't looking outside their window at activists and thinking, I think I'm going to create legislation to help those vegan activists out. They're just not doing that. They're listening to those that show them support and say, hey, I'm going to get you reelected next year. Any other questions?
How much money do we have to pay to a professional lobbyist?
I guess it depends on the country. So our organization doesn't take in any money. We are all volunteers, and we funnel that money directly to our lobbyists. Most groups can't operate that way. It's really hard. I mean, to just put in perspective, when none of us operationally are making a dime, we work all day long, and then I'll work from like 7 p.m. until 2 in the morning. Last night I was up till 3 a.m. It like every night. It's like I have 2 jobs. Again, as of Friday, my employment changed, but to do it as fast as possible, you'll want to find a group that can volunteer and pass, you know, that majority of the money to a lobbyist. You can hire a lobbyist in the United States. It's expensive for a professional lobbyist, but we found a group called Lobbyists for Good, where they're a nonprofit, and what they do is that they write off the operational expenses and then charge us like $100 to $150 an hour for the lobbyist, whereas a lobbyist normally would be almost $500 here an hour. That's a lot. And so we hired, you know, hours for under $100,000 for the year. And I want to mention how far one lobbyist goes, but you want to get to the point of scaling. So even if you can hire lobbyists part-time, that would be great. And so remember, if they're working hourly, if you're able to help them draft the legislation, like maybe they tell you, hey, I just need this research items, I need these bullet points, I need this background. If you get enough people together to volunteer to help out with that, you volunteer that time so that what they're doing is creating these relationships, making these meetings, and showing up, to meet with them. And then those are the hours that you're paying them for versus, sort of like the development of the strategy. You'd be surprised that you actually know more about the strategy, even though you're not in politics, than you think, simply because we negotiate when we're doing activism all the time, right? So I would count on trying to get anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a month in donations. I know that sounds like a lot, but I'm telling you, and it is in a lot of ways. It's been a lot of work to get to that point, but once people realize that this is preventing our veganism from being heard, and once all of us are on board, you're going to see this take off. I believe in a year, something's going to happen. I don't know if one of the documentaries that I've been filmed in will end up on Netflix, or what it is that will help, snowball this, but something's going to, and get started now, because we can't wait for, I say this all the time, you cannot get paralyzed by perfection. If I had gotten paralyzed a year ago, two very famous people that you guys know told me, what are you going to change? Do you actually think you're going to get a lobbyist? They asked me, have you ever lobbied? And I said, no, I haven't. And I'm not trying to be the lobbyist. They discouraged me in every way a year ago. They're like, I don't know how you're going to get this money to hire somebody. What change is that one person going to do? Like, if I had gotten paralyzed, we wouldn't have this lobbyist, and we wouldn't be changing this narrative in our politics right now. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't get paralyzed because you're not perfectly the expert. You don't have to be. All you need to do is put your entrepreneur hat on, mixed with your vegan passion, and you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. Any other questions?
Carol?
Yeah, I have a question about, because I'm volunteering for groups that are advocating for a citizens assembly. It's kind of make it more democratic, because elections are really not democratic at all.
Yeah.
This is what I realized only quite recently. So I don't know, what is your view on that, on citizens assembly? I guess to get this happening, we also need lobby, but I think it can go together with the lobbying that you are advocating for. I don't know.
So citizens assembly is a group that lobbies, or what is it exactly?
No, it's actually an idea. It's very old already, like 2,000-3,000 years old. That you randomly choose citizens, like 100 or 1,000, and they will decide about a certain topic, and then the outcome has to be implemented by the government. There has to be some kind. Should not be voluntary, but and there's a book I read recently. It's from a Belgian guy. I can put it in the chat because it's really.
Yeah, I see it. There's groups like that here, but how do you overthrow the current government?
Well, it's not about overthrowing. It's next to it, existing next to it. But yeah, I don't know. I just was wondering what your thoughts are on it, but I guess.
So the philosophical groups here that sort of apply that same voting mechanism, and everybody has to be on board. I guess my thing is with taxation, like how would that ever run through a citizens assembly, right? When the taxes goes, even if it's adjacent, our taxes still get absorbed and go and are enlisted into how they're allocated by the government. So wouldn't you have to somehow change who controls the taxes?
Yeah, so I really don't know much enough about it to answer.
Okay.
But
yeah. So I think those ideas are good, and I think that structure is great. The thing is like we're up against a lot of power corruption, and I don't think that they would just hand us over the ability to allocate taxes how we want, right? That's all the laws they're putting out there to prevent us from. It very much is run by elite corporations who know how to abuse this system. The hard part is that people like you and me that want peace, and we want everybody to love each other, and we're like puppies, and they operate like predators. And so the point is the playbook is a rough playbook. It's a rough playbook, and we have to be willing to play it. Not saying, again, that's what I'm saying, I'm not the lobbyist, but I'm hiring a lobbyist who knows how to play it. Nothing that we're doing is unethical. Right now, everything is relationships. But if you were to ask me in 5 years, if paying somebody off, which is, let's say it's legal to pay somebody's campaign, and we had enough money to do it, to change their mind about how they create laws about animals, and someone might think that paying someone like that's unethical even though it's legal. If you were to ask me in 5 years if I would allow that to happen, I don't know, I might. Do you know what I mean? It is like a rough, corrupt system, and playing by the rules that's legal might not play by the same rules that maybe in some circles people would think is ethical. You know what I mean? To use money to persuade somebody. But if it's legal and that's how decisions are being made, is it that far off of something we would do? So the point I'm making is that a lot of those structures that I see where citizens are able to do that, you're so blocked by the corporate elite corrupt system. So I would need to see an example where someone paved an avenue to say, oh no, this actually will work because, if we're able to control taxes this way. So if someone wants to send information on that, I'd be happy to look at it. Okay, so ICT said she had to go to dinner, or they had to go to dinner. Yeah, so I think it's, I know the time has been long, and I appreciate all of you guys for listening in. This is sort of step one of engagement. I'm happy to do another. At the end of the day, whether you become a lobbyist locally, whether you want to create a vegan justice league chapter, whether you want to support an existing lobbying group that maybe you find in your country, I want you to come away from this knowing that veganism and activism alone is not changing these laws that are still making the overproduction. So we have to solve that if we want animal liberation. The food system being rigged makes animal liberation over here and veganism over here. We want veganism to get there, and you absolutely need to still be doing activism and being vegan, but we cannot buy enough oat milk. Like, I could get the whole country buying oat milk, But if the whole country's taxes are bailing them out, I cannot save a cow in the United States unless I break in and steal one. You know what I mean? And that is not what I intended. I literally thought the moment I was vegan that I saved 200 animals. I literally thought that. And anytime I was doing activism and I veganized someone, I'd be like, 200, 400, 800 animals saved, 1,000. I literally thought that. And that is how it should work. But of course, the same evil industry that's exploited humans and land and animal for years freaking knew that I'd be naive. They knew that they would break me somehow. And so I'm not going to just act like, oh, well, it's my taxes. What am I going to do? 4 years ago, someone said something about subsidies. I was like, what am I supposed to do about that? I was like paralyzed. Like I do what I can to the best of my ability. I'm challenging that. The best of our ability is to go further and to create a lobbying structure in our country, in our local city, and push things so that we can, in our lifetime, before the tipping point, start seeing the animals that should have been saved. In the United States, there are 9 million dairy cows in rotation. At least 10% shouldn't even exist. So there's at least 1 million dairy cows that should have never been bred into existence. 1 million, at least. If the numbers are true, that it's more like 20, 25% losses they've had over the last several years, it's literally 2.5 million cows we could have saved. So the current system's preventing that. We have to change it. Any other questions?
Somebody had a question. Can you get involved in lobbying if you don't hold citizen in the country you're currently in? Example, those who hold resident permits and such.
That's a good question. And I think it depends on the country. So I don't think you can technically have political influence in a way that you say, you know, I'm voting for you. But if you're part of a group who is educating and creating relationships to that politician or to politicians, I think it's legal. And I think you should do it, right? Like nobody is going to come in and audit like how that person got elected based on your education that you gave to the public. Case in point, Smithfield Farms in China and them getting that loophole of our taxes. I don't doubt that that was lobbied by Chinese investors somehow, right? People think it's a loophole, like perhaps it just snuck out, but it snuck out like 3 years in a row. They could have plugged that, you know, that loophole up. So point is I don't think you can say something to the effect of like, you know, I'm voting for you or this and that, because you, if you're not a citizen, you wouldn't be able to, but you could be part of a group that educates people or applies, you know, pressure through education. Any other questions?
I think there's one more from Peter.
Okay.
That should be the last one.
Can somebody send me everyone's email address? I want to send you the video. It's a password protected video. The password's vegan. It's really easy. I'll send that to you. But I want to send you guys the video so that you can understand that transition from activism to lobbying and why it's important. Again, you don't have to pick one or the other, but it really, it's 3 minutes long, and I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll make you feel like, oh my gosh, like this hits home for sure.
So yeah, I would say send your email address to Animal Resistance and we'll make a list and send it to you.
What is Animal Resistance email address? I was only speaking directly with Alicia.
animalresistance@gmail.com.
Okay. I can just send you the video and you can send it out to everybody.
Awesome. Great.
Okay. the last question?
You were saying that you suggest that we make a chapter in our area so we don't step on anybody else's toes or something to that effect. Is that only relevant to the US that you're saying that we should set up a chapter, like would just a local group with your own whatever name you decide to give it do like the same sort of job?
Yeah, so more what I was saying is that if you find a local lobbying group in your area and you feel like they're tracking to changing laws in the way that you feel they need to be changed, join them or volunteer for them. But a lot of the lobbying groups in the United States that I came across, there was a group that advocated for plant-based companies. And when they so their plant-based companies are their lobbying members. And when they were advocating for them, they're dealing with legislation state by state where each state is trying to change the rules where you can't call milk, plant-based milk, or plant-based meat. And it's hijacking so much of their time purposely, obviously. And then there's another lobbying group that is national here that tries to change how schools get plant-based meals in them. So, the dairy industry forces their way into the school system. And so this group is trying to get more plant-based options. So those groups are great, right? But to me, they weren't directly reducing the stockpile and that corruption. Does that make sense? And so that's why I started lobbying. I actually spent 6 months trying to find a lobbying group that wanted to work together to basically allow me to just send members to them. But they were busy doing things that to me wasn't what also needed to be done. Not saying they were doing things that didn't need to be done. I wanted to be focused on this corruption and dismantling how we were being blocked, from saving animals. So that's why I was saying, if that's the case, I would start a chapter of Vegan Justice League, not because you couldn't start your own chapter of something, but how are you going to get the resource help? It would be really hard for me or other groups to give you resource help without you also kind of being part of our group. It just become really difficult for me. We are a very inclusive organization. We have an inclusivity policy, and we're developing one that is just super diverse, and it's, so we only want to ally ourselves with people and other groups like that. And the best way to uphold that is to be a Vegan Justice League chapter. But I'm not saying you can't start your own.
Yeah.
Start your own. I think what makes it interesting to start chapters there with a very similar mindset is that then we could all be meeting once every 2 months to deploy certain strategies that are worldwide. Because again, think about those trade deals, right? Or like 20% of our pigs are exported. So every vegan that's made here that doesn't eat pig anymore, our taxes are hustling to find a new pig eater in another country, So again, even that doesn't allow your veganism to reduce production because they're just finding someone to export to. And so we could deploy global strategies like that, where perhaps if we had a chapter in India while they're trying to create a trade deal, if we were powerful enough, we could prevent it from happening.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I see. What happens if you go and live or travel overseas? Can you still participate in lobbying in your home country?
Yeah, I mean, you can donate your money to a lobbying group in your home country. At the very least, remember, at the very least, money being centralized has a lobbyist, you know, working for you. And so absolutely, at the very least, like I said, it should be imperative that all of us are lobbying members. Not because I'm saying, hey, join our group and make our group money. So it isn't that. I'm saying just period. Social justice movement, social justice. The justice part is the legal and law part. And we absolutely cannot break those laws just from activism. And so, so I think it's imperative that we are a lobbying member for something. Any other questions? I'm hoping you found this valuable. It's an emotional roller coaster sometimes, understanding that this system is preventing us. And I've had some people take that out on me because I'm, you know, telling the truth about the system. I'm not telling us not to be vegan or not do activism. It's so important. And I'm not telling you it doesn't matter. I'm telling you that without lobbying, we are getting blocked. Without these laws changing, we are getting blocked. And it needs to make us angry at the system so that we can change the system.
Yeah, maybe wanted to round up a little bit with, because there was a lot of information today. What is the one thing that people should remember from this workshop? What's the one thing they should take away from it?
Lobbying is imperative, and don't get paralyzed by perfection. Start somewhere. It is so important to start somewhere. There's a guy, Nalang, in the Bay Area, and he is working with city council to make sure that all of the places that they do their meetings are vegan, basically, that they feed them vegan food. I mean, there are so many ways to insert yourself into this conversation. Consider, if you're young, consider thinking about 10 years from now, maybe you run for some political thing, either locally or even bigger. I'm 40. I kind of feel like I waited too long to realize this stuff. But if I was younger, I would have easily been running for city council and stuff, you know. But again, don't get paralyzed by perfection. You don't have to be political at all to quarterback this and to be a lobbying member.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connie. I also see a lot of thank yous in the comments. I don't know if your chat is open.
Yeah, it is.
Saying thank you was very interesting. And yeah, as animal resistance, thank you so much for giving us the information. And it really, like, I'm a little mind blown myself as well. I did had a little lobby workshop up front, but I think this one was a lot more, that was more like how, like the practical stuff.
And the why, like the why, like
yeah.
Why this isn't just lobbying to change laws. This is preventing us from all the hard work that we do from being realized. Like that's the question I leave you with. Like, how important is liberating animals? Is it important enough to figure this out, even if we're not perfect and we're not experts at it? In my mind, it is. I don't like politics. I like spending my time doing the vegan Batman light, honestly. I do. I love it. But it's so important to me to liberate animals, and I want you to feel the same. At the very least, with education, if you have the socioeconomic condition to allow you to centralize money, and if you have the time to organize people to do so, it is so important. Yes, contact me. My email is info@veganjusticeleague.com.
Cool, because I want to do that bat light thing. I'll be contacting you.
And then my Instagram is vegan. I'm writing this in the chat really fast. Vegan_bat. I have my YouTube is, I think you can just search Vegan Bat Girl YouTube. Vegan Justice League on Instagram is Vegan Justice League, and at Agriculture Fairness Alliance. Then there's these websites. Those are short URLs for it, so those are the shortened URLs for Vegan Justice League and Agriculture Fairness Alliance. And I'm going to be sending a video. I hope you guys watch it. I hope you guys consider sharing it. I actually want to make this video into a long form documentary. So if you know anybody who has the ability to create, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes of like kind of like a really good shareable one, or even one to pitch, you know, for like an actual like Netflix type documentary. The 3 minutes of the video includes my activism in the beginning, and then it includes a problem. I don't mean a documentary that includes me. I'm more saying like the content of how the food system is rigged. Again, that conservative angle in a documentary, I think, will bridge all the things that we've been struggling with obviously making a case for the climate, obviously making a case for the empathy, but that's only a certain part of the population, and the other side, like what we really need is the conservative side. So that video will be sent. It's not boring, I promise you, and it's only 3 minutes. And so I will send it over, and I hope all of you have, I hope whatever is going on with your lockdown or your emotional state, whatever, trust me, I live by myself. I am going through all of it. And so any support that I can give you,